Faraway Wanderers. Chapter 46, Misfortune. Trailing behind Yebai, their little group wandered around the mountain range until they ventured into a patch of woods. As soon as they entered the forest, Josishu's entire body tensed up inexplicably. He couldn't exactly say what danger hid amidst the trees, but a sense of imminent crisis seized him. Wen Kexing, who had been annoyingly loud the whole journey, had become quiet at this moment. Even Yebai's face turned grave. The man in white made stops every now and then, proceeding with extreme caution. Only Jiang Chengling was unaware and sensed nothing was amiss. The boy was secretly rejoicing because it seemed he was getting the day off. His Shifu held him by the arm with his thin but firm hand, the heat from his palm warm enough to radiate through Jiang Chengling's thick, cotton-padded winter vest. It made him feel very safe, and he obediently let himself be pulled along with quiet joy blooming in his heart. Yebai mumbled under his breath and would occasionally stop to draw diagrams on the ground with a twig. It intrigued Wen Kexing at first, and he went to have a closer look. However, he found out soon enough that the complex computation only gave him a headache. He retreated to one side to stand shoulder to shoulder with Josishu. "Don't you want to have a look at what he's doing over there?" he asked the other man in a low voice. Josishu's reply was full of self-awareness. "What for? I wouldn't understand it, anyway." He frowned before adding with a likewise lowered voice, "Thing is, the scouts I sent here were expert engineers, who were also masters in cosmic calculation. I wonder why none of them could find the puppet's manner." Wen Kexing asked, "Didn't you say that you had someone drew a map of the area?" Josishu replied, "Yes, but when the cartographer came back with more people to find the manner using the map he had drawn, not a single one of them returned." Wen Kexing gave a solemn glance at the back of Yebai, who was squatting on the ground, and lowered his voice even more. "If even have perished in this place, do you reckon the old glutton can be relied on?" Josishu was about to speak, but before he could say anything, Yebai stood up and turned to them. He said coldly, "The rest of the road is dangerous. If you don't want to die, step only on my footprints." He shot a look at Josishu, who was rubbing his nose, and added with a sneer, "Masters in cosmic calculation, huh? With a useless leader like you, how could any of your subordinates be anything other than fat-headed rice tubs?" With that, Yebai turned and walked off. The facial expressions of those three turned odd. Anyone who had witnessed how Yebai descend upon food before, and hearing him disparage others as fatheads or rice tubs, would have felt and have same expressions as well. Note: a rice tub means someone who eats a lot, implying incompetence because they do nothing but eat. But as eccentric as the man was, and putting Jiang Chengling aside, the two adults present knew to differentiate the important from the trivial. So, they followed after Yebai at once. As he was being led along, Jiang Chengling glimpsed that there were more and more carcasses from various animals by the side of the track they followed. The boy felt that the place was very eerie. After they walked on for a while longer, he spotted a few sets of human skeletons which were all decapitated. The sight terrified him. He addressed Josishu in a trembling voice, "Shifu, why would the person we're looking for want to live in a place like this?" Josishu tilted his head to cast a glance at him. "How would I know? In a vast jungle, there will be birds of any kind." Jiang Chengling hopped over a thigh bone with caution and couldn't refrain from asking his Shifu again. "This place is so isolated and has so many traps around it that each step is dangerous. Wouldn't the person who lives here be afraid of losing their own way home whenever they wanted to come out? Isn't it just like putting mouse traps under one's own bed?" "Mouse traps under one's own bed?" Josishu inquired back, intrigued. Jiang Chengling said, "Once, when I was a younger, there was a mouse in the room. I couldn't catch it, so I put 2 mouse traps under the bed and went to sleep. But I forgot about it the next morning. I stepped on it and got my toes fractured by the mousetrap." Wen Kexing overheard them and burst out into giggles with a snorting sound. Josishu sighed. Then he spotted that Jiang Chengling was about to take a wrong step because he was so engrossed in his storytelling. He hauled the boy back. "Shut up and watch your steps. Do you want to die?" Jiang Chengling bit his tongue while Zhou Zishu went on in a frosty tone, "And don't judge others by your own standards. How many people on earth do you think are as stupid as you?" Wen Kexing picked up the topic of conversation. "Actually, there aren't that many reasons for why would a person want to hide," he said to Jiang Chengling in a gentle and patient voice. "Either a person thinks they have enemies who want to hunt and kill them, so they have to conceal themselves somewhere where no one can find them. Somewhere like the Ghost Valley, perhaps." Zhou Zishu cut in. Wen Kexing glanced at him and said, "If you want to put it that way, well, yes," he replied. Zhou Zishu seized the chance to question the man further. "Ah. So, what unforgivable misdeed did the Valley Master commit back then for him to have no other choice but to hide in the Ghost Valley?" Wen Kexing didn't mind his opportunistic interrogation. "You meant me?" "I, naturally, was a special case," he replied unabashedly. "I didn't commit any crime and simply entered it cluelessly. To this day I still wonder how a good person like me managed to live amongst a bunch of devils for so many years. Just like the lotus flower, I'm truly someone who has grown out of the mud yet remains unsullied, and who is by clear ripples pure yet does not my charms flaunt." Zhou Zishu snorted and said nothing. It went without saying that he took everything the guy said as pure bullshit. Wen Kexing heaved a sigh. "Asu, you hurt my feelings, you know boy, do you think I'm a good person?" He had a good temperament, was highly skilled at martial arts and even told stories. Jiang Chengling was in such awe of the senior that he was nearly prostrating himself in reverence. Upon hearing his question, he instantly nodded, bobbing his head up and down like a pestle pounding garlic. Wen Kexing was almost moved to tears. He patted the boy on the head and exclaimed with a poignant sigh, "Children always know best. They have a conscience and know how to differentiate good from evil. If you're nice to them, they will remember it. Unlike a certain someone." Alas! Zhou Zishu kept quiet. Although they were both men who commanded other men, Wen Kexing's circumstances certainly differed from his. They were even different from those of someone like Gao Chong. Gao Chong led a bunch of people who deemed themselves upholders of orthodoxy. He only needed to deploy a few words like the righteous cause for all under heaven and confine themselves to self-imposed limits. On the other hand, those in Tianchuang basically joined to sell their lives to him and to the emperor. The full might of the imperial throne backed his former organization, and since its inception to this day, nobody except him had dared challenge it. But Ghost Valley is different, because within the Ghost Valley was a bunch of fugitives, a group of desperate people. Those people were like a swarm of extremely vicious poisonous insects who'd been locked in a small cramped container where devouring one another was the only way to survive. It was a place that teemed with a million evil souls and where only when one died could another live. There were no morals and ruled by the survival of the fittest alone. Anyone who emerged from it could be likened to the goo insect king of legend, the last standing survivor of a savage struggle between venomous creatures that concentrated within its body all the poisons of the competitors it had devoured. Wen Kexing was good at pretenses. So good, even Zhou Zishu sometimes confused him for an ordinary, talkative man. To the side, Wen Kexing continued explaining to Jiang Chengling, and if the person isn't hunted by foes, then there is another reason for them to hide from others. That would be, of course, a broken heart. They know they will never again lay eyes on the person they wish most to see, so they'd rather entomb themselves in a place like this. That way, in due time, they may find comfort in telling themselves that if their special person isn't with them, it's only because they can't find their way in. He exhaled a light sigh before he went on. If one day your Shifu is no longer around, I too might find a place like where we are now to retire. Otherwise, whenever I go out, I would see the many beauties prancing on the streets, only to find that the one who suits my heart best is not amongst them anymore. Wouldn't it be quite sad then? And here I thought you wanted to live and die with me, Josisha jibed. I did say that, but you didn't believe me, Wen Kexing bantered back. Just like you boya destroying his chin. Jiang Chenling chimed in from the side. Both men's faces went blank at the same time. Jiang Chenling looked at each man in turn, not knowing what was wrong with what he had said. A while later, he heard Wen Kexing said softly, "No one left in the world to comprehend from mountain rises the water's scent," he recited in a soft voice. To put it that way is correct, but also incorrect. He then glanced at Josishu, but Josishu looked away. Wen Kexing stopped speaking and continued to follow Ye Bai closely. All of a sudden, Ye Bai's footsteps faltered. He came to a standstill to listen to his surroundings intently while holding up a hand, signaling for the other to stop. "Be quiet," he ordered in a low voice. Josishu's grip on Jiang Chengling's arm tightened. Immediately afterwards, all four of them looked down at the same time. The ground beneath their feet was shaking, and a loud, unidentified humming sound echoed in the air. Wen Kexing shot Josishu a look that meant "told you the glutton isn't reliable, but you didn't believe me," but Josishu had no attention to spare him because in the next second, a surge of energy burst forth from beneath the ground. The mountain quaked, and the earth seemed on the verge of splitting. The four of them leapt into the air together. With Jiang Chenling in his hold, Josishu stepped on a branch from a large tree to gain leverage, but the branch snapped and fell off under the mere tap of his foot as if it were fake. Josishu inwardly shuddered in alarm. He twisted in mid-air and tried anchoring the point of his shoe to the tree trunk. But again in a split second, the entire massive tree collapsed in a resounding crash. Jiang Chenling buried his face into his shifu's chest. Out of nowhere, he recalled an idiom his school tutor had once taught him: lean against the mountain, and the mountain will fall; lean against the tree, and the tree will sprawl. So, it was true indeed, if one did not listen to the advice of his elders, the miseries he suffered were innumerous as money spent freely. The entire ground caved in as if an ominous mouth had gaped open in the earth, ready to devour everything and everyone. Josishu used the last momentum he had gained from stepping on the tree trunk to leap over 50 feet away. He had barely regained his footing, and hadn't yet had time to exhale a breath, when he scowled in a blink of the eye. Wen Kexing and Ye Bai had disappeared. Then, there was a sudden nothingness beneath his feet, and he felt himself plummeting towards the darkness below. Instantly, Josishu understood how the other two had vanished. He only had time to shield Jiang Chenling by cradling him into his arms before obscurity engulfed them. The patch of ground he had stepped on was a trapdoor. It had opened up and had now closed itself again. The pit into which they were free falling seemed to be bottomless. Reckoning that they'd crash to their death if he did nothing, Josishu gathered his chi in a sharp breath and struck with his palm at a protruding stretch of cliff below. The force of that blow couldn't have been measured. It blasted a crater into the rock wall. Stone debris and lumps of earth flew everywhere, but it decreased their downward velocity quite a bit, and Josishu seized the chance to kick the wall using the unbound and untracked Qinggong technique that was unique to his clan. His figure seemed to suspend itself in mid-air, as if glued to the vertical rock face. But then, Josishu realized that he had overreached, forgetting that his stamina nowadays was incomparable to what it used to be. Combined with carrying such a big lad as Jiang Chenling, this single strike caused his internal chi to stagnate where it was vital. Not good, Josishu inwardly thought, but glimpsed the rock wall which he had smashed in the quake once again. Before he could react, a sharp blade popped out of a crack in the rock wall and nearly speared the two of them like candied hawthorns on a stick. The two people suffered a fright, and Josishu had no choice but to release the grip in his foot and let them continue falling. Fortunately, they were already nearing the bottom. Josishu landed on his feet and let go of Jiang Chenling. Thankfully, the small luminescent pearl he had used to illuminate their surroundings when he had fallen into the underground cave with Wen Kexing that time was still on him. Although it only gave a weak glow, it was enough for him to see. though Josisha wondered at his affinity with dark tunnels. Had he offended some shrew mouse or mole in a former life to be condemned to their fate? At this moment, Jiang Chengling piped up in a small voice, "Shifu." Josisha shushed him and whispered in reply, "Be quiet." Jiang Chengling was so frightened that even his voice changed pitch. "No. Shifu, look." This time round he didn't need Jiang Chengling to point it out. Josisha has seen it too. In this narrow and cramped stone chamber, not far from them, there were two glowing eyes looking back at them. Josisha raised the luminescent pearl and made out the entirety of that thing. It was a gigantic python snake, its girth as thick as a man's waist. It was eyeing them predatorily whilst flicking out its forked tongue. Fortuitous events did not come in pair and trouble never travel alone. Josisha licked his lips and tasted what it meant to be so goddamn jinxed even water would stick between the teeth while taking a swig. What's more, and for some unfathomable reason, unmitigated terror turned Jiang Chengling into a chatterbox. His voice jabbered on in Josisha's ear, "Shifu, I've heard that pythons can move around really fast, so fast that a normal person can't evade them at all, and maybe because they have bad teeth, when they eat people, they'd first squash the person flat. If you get caught by one and it coils around you, you'd get strangled to death before every bone in your body gets crushed and your insides get squeezed into jelly, turning you into a flabby skin bag with only goo inside. Then, it will swallow you in one gulp because you'd have become so easy to digest." Josisha reached for his bi-sword at his waist as he growled through gritted teeth, "Shut your mouth." Then amidst Jiang Chengling's desolate howling, the python raised its head and swiftly struck at them. End chapter. Faraway Wanderers. Chapter 47, Puppet. The python was even taller than Josisha as it leapt toward him with its open maw aimed straight at his throat. Flinging Jiang Chengling into a corner, he dodged by crouching down. He unsheathed the bi-sword in the same instant and brought it down on the beast's neck from behind. Sparks flew as the bi-blade collided with the giant python's nape, but the reptile's skin wasn't even scratched. The creature flung its tail, missing Josisha's shoulder by the breadth of a hair, a blow that would have broken his neck for sure had he not been swift to duck. A loud clang reverberated in the air as the snake's tail landed onto the ground, blasting rock debris and sand everywhere. Aghast, Josisha retreated 3 successive steps. He could tell that his weapons would have shattered to pieces from making contact had he wielded any ordinary sword instead of bi. Something wasn't right. An abrupt thought flashed through Josisha's mind when the giant python's maw had pounced at him. He had not smelled the stench of blood. These animals eat their prey raw, with fur and blood all year round, so how could its mouth not smell of rot and gore? Jiang Chengling was curled up in a corner, but he had observed the entire scene with his neck stretched out in rapt attention. "Shifu," he exclaimed. "That snake looks like a fake one." As soon as the boy spoke up, the great python jolted and turned its head toward him while emitting a hissing sound. But Jiang Chengling didn't seem so frightened anymore. The foolish boy bounced up from the ground, not forgetting to dust off his behind, and pointed at the monster that was eyeing him voraciously. "Shifu, look at it. This snake looks so real." But the giant python struck again before he could finish his sentence. Earlier, Jiang Chengling was terrified, but upon realizing that the snake wasn't a real one, he started to become negligent. Doubtless because he thought the fake snake weren't dangerous as they didn't need to eat people for food. Josisha was at a loss for words. Was there ever a difference between being crushed into a sack of goo, and being crushed into a sack of goo that'd get devoured afterwards? But then, he couldn't very well stand by and watch while the brat got himself killed. He leapt into the air like an eagle spreading its wings, and dived at the python from its flank. Aiming a kick at the monster's head, he knocked it hurtling sideways. The thing was made of some unknown material that was incredibly sturdy. When he landed back on the ground, a dull ache lanced in his lower leg. This time, Jiang Chengling didn't dare say anything anymore. As he regained his footing, Josisha spotted a darkened passage behind the python's body. An idea formed in his mind. "Run towards the tunnel over there when I lure the thing away," he said to Jiang Chenling in a low voice. "But don't go into it. Wait for me at the entrance. Do you understand?" Jiang Chenling nodded obediently. The python jostled its head, appearing to recover, and Josisha shoved Jiang Chenling hard. "Go." Closing his eyes, Jiang Chenling charged forward like a headless house elf. Almost like he was demonstrating how mice scuttled, he nearly bumped right into the python. Fear constricted Josisha's chest. He hastily thrust his sword and stabbed the python in the eye, gouging out an eyeball made of the material he couldn't identify. At once, the python redirected its attention from Jiang Chenling and hurled itself at Josisha for a battle to the death. Although, of course, the thing wasn't alive in the first place, so it'd be hard for it to die a second time. Josisha climbed along the rock wall, drew in a sharp breath, and leapt about over 3 jong high. The giant python chased after him in relentless pursuit. From the corner of his eye, Josisha saw that Jiang Chenling had arrived at the tunnel entrance and looking at his direction with his face full of anxiety. Reassured, he aimed a sharp kick to the rock wall hard, flipping through the air over him. His body seemed to fold in two in mid-air, before he plunged headfirst toward the ground of the narrow pit. No matter how intricately it had been constructed, the giant python was still a fake one. It bent back to follow Josisha, but the space they were in was too narrow. Even though the material it was made of was strong enough to break swords, it wasn't as flexible as Josisha. A loud crack echoed in the stone chamber as Josisha landed and rolled to the side. His dodging was unnecessary since the fake python had snapped in half, some hinges still connecting its two parts as it got stuck between the pit's walls. The sight of its enormous tail dangling in the air looked slightly comical. Jiang Chenling bolted to Josisha's side. "Shifu, are you injured?" Josisha looked at him without saying a word. Jiang Chenling was extremely worried, his eyes blinking at him. He was sure that if he hadn't established an intimidating presence beforehand, Jiang Chenling would be patting him up and down to check whether he was missing a limb. He sighed and slapped him at the back of his skull saying, "Only ulcer from you making me angry. Follow closely behind me." Jiang Chenling reeled on his feet and followed him to the dark entrance that the giant snake had been guarding. It was a short and narrow passageway that led to a door. Josisha halted in front of the door, stretching an arm out to stop Jiang Chenling on his tracks and instructed him in a low voice, "Stand close to the wall to one side." In such a narrow space, if there was indeed a hidden mechanism that sprung out once he pushed the door open, it would truly be unavoidable. Josisha hesitated for a second. To err on the side of caution, he instructed Jiang Chenling, "Hold your breath." A long creaking noise shrilled through the air as the door swung open, dirt falling from its hinges. Josisha's whole body tensed up, but nothing happened. He raised the luminescent pearl in his hand and made out a smaller, dusty stone chamber to the other side, a thick layer of dirt covering everything. In a corner stood two people who weren't moving at all. Josisha grabbed the front of Jiang Chengling's robes and carefully edged closer to the immobile figures, just to discover when he neared that they were not living people, but two human puppets. They were about the size of actual human, one resembled a man and the other a woman, and they were so well made they appeared alive. Both had their eyes directed at the chamber's entrance, as if they were staring straight at the two intruders. Josisha frowned. He reflected that it explained the name Puppet's Manor. The place seemed to be devoid of any living creature but was full of all kinds of strange and odd-looking puppets everywhere. After his experience with the fake snake, Josisha didn't dare be careless. He scrutinized the two puppets' joints and found that they seemed more flexible by far than those of the python. Using the same trick on them would be useless. "Walk ahead of me," he whispered to Jiang Chenling. Slowly. Jiang Chenling obeyed, tiptoeing past him. Josisha walked with his back turned against Jiang Chengling's, his eyes never leaving those two puppets even for a single second. At the end of the stone room, Jiang Chengling whispered, "Shifu, there is another door in front of me." Upon hearing the boy's words, Zhou Zishu raised his sword in a horizontal guard and told Jiang Chengling to stand aside. He twisted to stand with his profile to the ancient-looking gate to push it open. A long and darkened corridor, the end of which he couldn't see, was on the other side. "Let's go," Zhou Zishu whispered. Both of them entered the corridor, one after the other. Zhou Zishu hesitated for a moment just beyond the threshold. The two figures seemed to be like any other puppet and hadn't moved, but for some unknown reason, the fine hair on his back was standing on end. Out of instinct, he closed the door behind him and bolted it. Thus, he didn't see that the instant he closed the door, the eyes of the puppets rolled in their sockets, as if trying to track the two intruders' silhouettes. The echoes of their footsteps reverberated in the cramped corridor, making the atmosphere particularly bleak and eerie. Jiang Chengling felt goosebumps rise all over him. "Shifu, I'm a little scared." As soon as the words were out of his mouth, he regretted saying them, thinking that his Shifu would scold him. Zhou Zishu, however, lifted his hand to cradle his shoulder instead. The man's hand was thin but warm, and when Jiang Chengling tilted his head, he glimpsed Zhou Zishu's profile by the faint glimmer of the luminescent pearl. It put his heart at ease. It was unknown how long the stone corridor was. Just when Zhou Zishu was running out of patience, they finally reached the end of it. He idly wondered where Ye Bai and Wen Kexing had ended up. Although he wasn't that worried. If anyone could survive the sky collapsing and the earth splitting, it would be those two. His own situation, on the other hand, with him having to look after a brat who stirred up trouble at critical moments, was more concerning. They reached a third door, a large one this time, and the line of his vision broadened as they came upon the space with a higher ceiling. Zhou Zishu pulled Jiang Chengling to stand behind him and opened the new gate. A great hallway that was utterly empty lay beyond it. Zhou Zishu looked down and noticed that the ground was of a darker ash-gray color. Jiang Chengling poked out his head from the side to glance up at him, no doubt wondering why he had stopped. Accustomed to operating cautiously, Zhou Zishu took out a crumb of silver from his breast and flung it out. The small ingot fell on the ground and rolled out a few inches. Nothing happened. Zhou Zishu was just letting go of the breath he'd been holding when a drop of liquid trickled down from the ceiling. Under both the adult's and child's wary gazes, it landed right on top of the silver crumb and melted it on the spot. Immediately afterwards, something even more terrifying occurred. Drips upon drips of the corrosive liquid fell, the downpour becoming denser and denser until it looked like rain. Zhou Zishu understood then why the ground was that sort of ominous gray color. If a person was doused by this sort of fatal showers, even their bones would be reduced to ash. His heart sank. Although he knew Qinggong that would allow him to travel over snow without leaving a trace, no technique in this world would permit someone to weave through the rain without getting wet. "We cannot pass this road. We're turning back," he said while retreating. The both of them had just turned around when the sound of footfall resonated in the air. They echoed from the stone corridor's opposite end. Tap tap tap. Jiang Chengling was almost clinging to Zhou Zishu with his whole body as he stammered, "Shishi shishi, Shifu, it's that a ghost." Zhou Zishu raised a finger to shush him. "Go close the door behind us, so we don't go through it again by mistake," he said while tilting his head toward the boy. "Hurry. Then, stay there and hide. Don't make a sound." Jiang Chengling instantly did as he was instructed. The footsteps got faster and faster as they closed in, as if the person making them had broken into a run, before, suddenly, they stopped. The light provided by his luminescent pearl was limited. Zhou Zishu bent his ear to listen to his surroundings, but he couldn't make out the breathing of a second person in the narrow corridor besides that of Jiang Chengling. Then, a gleam of light flashed in the darkness. Zhou Zishu reflexively raised his bi-sword to parry. His opponent's heavy sword slammed down, the force of it jarring the juncture of his thumb and forefinger numb. In the split second, Josisha glimpsed his opponent and cold sweat drenched his back. The person who had hacked at him with a heavy sword turned out to be the male puppet from the small stone chamber earlier. With a grim flash of insight, Josisha realized that the person who designed this place had a devious mind. If they had triggered a mechanism in the small stone chamber earlier, he'd have doubtless retreated with Jiang Chenling at once. That area was vast and empty, and there was no doubt that the puppets could not perform Qinggong. So, even though it may have been difficult, the situation wouldn't have been hopeless, especially to someone who had already defeated the Great Python. The designer had clearly anticipated this, so they had lured them into a dead end on purpose. In that narrow corridor, even if someone had amazing martial prowess, it would be difficult to fully utilize it. The trap was calculated to cut off all escape routes for intruders. Josisha inwardly bemoaned the situation. He disengaged his blade by sliding it up, and executed a reverse slash. The edge of his sword hit the puppet's arm but couldn't cut through. Whether or not it was made of the same material as the fake snake, it certainly was as sturdy. Without pause, the puppet mechanically swung at him again. Josisha timed his move. He let out a small sound of exertion as he executed a brilliant maneuver. Gracefully, Bai twirled in a dexterous flip, blade parrying blade. Exerting a great strength, he channeled his Neogong onto the hallowed weapon and cleaved the heavy sword in that puppet's hand right into two. Jiang Chenling had never seen this level of technique before. He held his breath as he watched, transfixed. However, losing its weapon didn't seem to bother the puppet in the slightest. Its fingers expanded with a faint clicking sound, discarding the broken heavy sword, before it swung its arm toward Josisha again. Indeed, the thing wasn't afraid of pain or death and could use its whole body as a weapon. Irritated beyond words, Josisha grappled at the arm swinging at him. If it had been any normal person, his move would have dislocated their entire shoulder. But the puppet was sturdy to the extreme. It only pushed ahead, dragging Josisha along, until Josisha's back was pressed against the door to the hallway with the acid shower. Josisha released his grip and crouched down. With a resounding bang, the puppet's fist punched a hole into the door and went right through. Josisha couldn't have been more thankful that he had the foresight to tell Jiang Chenling to close that door. But then, in the next moment, all gratitude eluded him. The female puppet was standing behind the male one. Doubtless because the thing couldn't turn, she marched straight ahead, toward Jiang Chenling, who had dodged to the side to get out of his way. Josisha's blood ran cold. He evaded a horizontal arm swipe from the male puppet by hunching down and darted towards the boy. The female puppet's move seemed to be even swifter than that of her alter ego. Josisha only had time to shield Jiang Chenling before she struck with a xiao flute she held in one hand like a long stick. The place was too small, and with no way to avoid the blow, Josisha could only absorb the full brunt of the blow with his back. The impact instantly making him cough up a mouthful of blood. With both his arms braced against the wall, the fresh blood in his mouth dripped onto Jiang Chengling's shoulder as his body pitched forward uncontrollably, almost crushing the youth underneath him. Seemingly forgetting everything about his own terror, Jiang Chenling hurriedly extended his hands to support him. With an inhuman effort, Josisha used the boy's support to push himself to the side, dodging the female puppet's second hit that grazed his head. He almost lost his grip on his Bai sword as the 7-3 autumn nails of the 7 acupuncture jolted in his chest. His vision went dark. "You dare hurt my Shifu," he heard Jiang Chenling bellow in rage. "I'm gonna kill you." With that, the boy launched himself at the puppets. This brat was always timid when he should be bold, but daring when he should be timid. Josisha tried to hold him back but was a beat too late. He could only watch as Jiang Chenling ferociously leapt at the stony female puppet with his teeth bared and no weapon in his hands, as if he intended to bite the puppet to death. "Brat," Josisha tried to say. But as soon as he parted his lips, he choked on a mouthful of his own blood that sent him into a fit of unstoppable coughs. Just at that moment, a thundering explosion shook the air and the wall next to the female puppet collapsed. The puppet couldn't dodge and got crushed beneath the falling rocks, the metal chiao still brandished in her hand. A wretched-looking figure burst into the corridor, coughing and patting themselves down to get rid of the dust covering them. What the hell is this PLA? Asu. Josishu sighed in relief and almost failed to draw in his next breath. For the first time in his life, he was glad to see Wen Kexing. End chapter. Faraway Wanderers. Chapter 48, A Dangerous Situation. While on the ground, the female puppet extended its leg. Wen Kexing didn't notice at first and almost stepped on it. He jumped up only when she swept her flute at his feet. Behind him, the male puppet had already extracted its arm from the doorway and was turning in their direction. Wen Kexing picked up Zhang Chengling and threw him into the hole in the wall from which he came. Then, he stooped to gather Josishu into his arms before he leapt after the boy. The male puppet chased them at once. Wen Kexing turned around to eye it warily, but the puppet seemed to be capable of moving in only two directions, forward and backward. It could only either retreat or advance and did not have the ability to move sideways. Unable to find its targets, it kept pacing up and down the corridor until the female puppet tripped it up with her flute in an excellent illustration of the saying piercing one's shield with one's own spear. The male puppet collapsed to the floor with a resounding clang. Doubtless because it thought itself under attack, it swung its arm at the female puppet's head, and the two puppets went at each other in internal strife. Wen Kexing finally heaved a sigh of relief and whispered to Josishu, "Don't talk." Then he sealed a few of Josishu's acupuncture points and set him down. He frowned when he saw the blood stained on his chest. He said to Zhang Chengling, "Boy, go over to that opening and take a look. If there is some kind of..." He paused, not knowing how to describe it. "If there are sphere-shaped thing," he went on while gesturing with his hands, "that are about a foot high rolling this way, come back to warn me at once." Zhang Chengling made a noise of understanding and asked, "Senior, my Shifu, is he?" Wen Kexing cut him off impatiently. "He's fine. He won't die." Zhang Chengling asked, "Senior, that thing you're talking about?" Wen Kexing sighed. "I don't know either." He pointed at the gaping hole in the stone wall. "That's the result of that thing exploding." Zhang Chengling followed his finger with his gaze and shuddered. It turned out even the senior, who appeared to be very capable, had been chased all the way here. He took off toward the opposite end of the chamber at once and anxiously stood guard. Wen Kexing reached out to undo the front of Josishu's robe, but the other man caught his wrist. "What are you doing? Trying to take advantage of me?" Josishu gibed in a hoarse voice. Wen Kexing slapped Josishu's hand away and gave him a light poke in the chest. "How about you save it for once?" he replied in an airy tone. A breath away from kicking the bucket and still being so talkative. Josishu consequently felt that he has come full circle in his life. He had been called a rice bin by a first-rate glutton, and now a chatterbox extraordinaire had stated that he was a big mouth. Wen Kexing unfastened the lapels of his robes with caution. When his gaze came upon the nails on Josishu's chest, he couldn't help but flinch. Josishu didn't give a damn, though. At the moment, he felt as if his entire torso and back were on fire and knew that his injury wasn't a light one. He suspected fractured bones, and his lungs must have been affected as well. Thus, to prevent worsening his condition, he forced himself not to cough and made himself take extremely shallow breath. Wen Kexing made him turn over and let out an outright gasp when he saw the wound on his back. "Would you believe that, an inch to the side and it would have broken your spine," he said in an icy tone. "Nonsense," Josishu retorted in a murmur. "If a puppet could break my spine, I'd be too ashamed to carry on living." Wen Kexing snorted. He reached out to carefully examine Josishu's injury. After a good while, he gave a sigh. "Are you an idiot? Or don't you feel it when it hurts?" His fingertip pressed some sore spot, and Josishu had to muffle a groan. The pain was so overwhelming, it robbed him of speech. After a while, he grumbled through gritted teeth, "How about you let me bludgeon you? So, you can have a taste." Wen Kexing fell into one of his rare bouts of silence. He propped Zhou Zishu upright and laid his palm to the middle of his back to channel his true qi into Zhou Zishu's body. He did not dare to use too much force out of fear that he might rattle the nails in his chest just like how Ye Bai had done last time. In his whole life, Wen Kexing had only ever practiced martial arts with the purpose of killing and hurting. This was the first time he was using his kung fu to carefully try to save someone. He felt like a butcher who had picked up a sewing needle and trembled with trepidation every second of it. Sweat drenched his forehead in no time. The best part of an hour went by before he withdrew his hand and released Zhou Zishu at last. He helped the man lean against the wall. Zhou Zishu shut his eyes to rest, doubtless because he knew that he was in terrible shape and was trying to preserve his strength. A gory stain that he had failed to wipe off smeared the side of his mouth. It contrasted starkly with the ashen complexion of his skin, making his face look even more ghastly pale. Wen Kexing gazed at him for a long while, until, unable to control himself, he bent down to take the corner of Zhou Zishu's lips between his own. He licked away the speck of blood and sighed as he carted his fingers through the hair at Zhou Zishu's temple. They were so close, their breaths mingled. Zhou Zishu had opened his eyes but didn't waste any energy to stop the other man. "What low-life manners, taking advantage of others' misfortune," he uttered in a low voice. Wen Kexing didn't even look up and returned his compliment in an equally low voice, "You talk as if you were a gentleman." Then he chuckled lightly. Zhou Zishu could not maintain his pretense of calm any longer and turned his face away with some discomfort. However, Wen Kexing grabbed his chin and kept it in place. "Don't you have a heart? I healed your injury. Do I not get even this little reward?" Zhou Zishu remained silent for quite a while before he replied, "Sorry, but selling my body is not in my plans at the moment." Wen Kexing laughed. "Do you know what happens to people who aren't as strong as somebody else, then?" Zhou Zishu arched his brow and stared at him like he was the pinnacle of human shamelessness. However, Wen Kexing only leaned in closer and he whispered into his ear, "They get bought by force." Zhou Zishu gave a bitter chuckle. "Your appetite is out of this world." Wen Kexing ogled him with a dirty glint in his eyes for yet longer before he released his grip. He crossed both arms behind his head and stretched out his legs to rest his feet on the wall opposite. Leaning back, he said in a lazy voice, "But tell you what, I'll let you owe it to me for now." Zhou Zishu was exhausted. He stopped talking nonsense with him. With his head groggy, he closed his eyes again and soon half passed out, half dozed off. Wen Kexing was well aware of his own limitations. Amongst the three of them, Ye Bai was the only person who understood this unfathomable witchcraft that was the art of vanishing door. They might come across unknown dangers if they continue to stumble around like headless fireflies. At present, Zhang Chengling is a youth who haven't matured enough to grow facial hair and Zhou Zishu was grievously injured. They might as well adopt a tactic of countering infinite volatile changes with stagnancy, to rest and recover where they are. They could think of a solution when they had rested. The sound of Zhou Zishu's breathing was low but even. He seemed to have fallen asleep. Wen Kexing turned his head to gaze over at him. He suddenly recalled what the great shaman of Nanjiang had said, "Lord Zhou, if you are willing to give up your kung fu and though the chances are slim, I may have a way to preserve your life." As if in a trance, he sat upright, gathered his energy into his palm, and raised his arm and raised it slowly. "Maybe if..." Just as his palm hovered in hesitation, a hand suddenly plunged out of thin air. Icy fingers reached out to grip his wrist. Zhou Zishu had opened his eyes unbeknownst to him. Both men stared at each other in the cramped stone chamber. "What were you trying to do?" Zhou Zishu asked in a calm voice. His face likewise betrayed no emotion. Wen Kexing failed to reply. Zhou Zishu sighed. He looked away and threw an abrupt line at him. Others wouldn't understand, but don't tell me that you can't either. Wen Kexing slowly dropped his gaze. A long while later, he gently let his palm drop to his side. I understand. As he spoke, he abruptly pounded his arm downward, leaving a palm print an inch deep into the hard ground. Yes, I do understand, he repeated, as if trying to persuade himself. Jiang Chenling didn't know when he had fallen asleep, nor did he know for how long he had slept when a loud noise jolted him awake. He jumped to his feet in an instant and looked around in all directions warily. A hand landed on his shoulder, making him shudder. He turned and saw that it was only his Shifu who, just yesterday, couldn't even stand upright. Zhou Zishu coughed a few times as he held Jiang Chenling in place. Don't fidget. Follow us, he instructed. Jiang Chenling looked over his shoulder and saw that Wen Kexing had also followed Zhou Zishu out. He looked at the two men, one after the other, and asked, Shifu, has your injury healed? I'm not human. Zhou Zishu replied, not even glancing back. Jiang Chenling mulled it over and reflected that his Shifu was right. With an injury that severe. Brushing off Zhou Zishu's unkind tone, he anxiously went up again to ask, then Shifu. So, can you walk on your own? Zhou Zishu inhaled a deep breath. Not only was he sore all over, he felt a headache looming as well. He asked, what else do you think I'm doing? Wen Kexing turned his head to the side to laugh. Jiang Chenling scratched his head and said, Shifu, what I meant is, with you being so gravely injured. Zhou Zishu threw him a look. So, you think I should act delicate in a place like this, perhaps? Or maybe you would like to carry me on your back. Jiang Chenling was just about to demonstrate his filial piety when Wen Kexing hastily cut in, I'll carry you on my back. I can even carry you in my arms if you prefer that. Zhou Zishu turned aside to let out another fit of coughing while he clutched at his chest with his shoulders hunched. Cut it out, both of you, he snapped. The three of them cautiously made their way along the tunnel, towards the origin of the loud noise. In caution, Zhou Zishu closed his palm around a luminescent pearl he held, plunging their surroundings in darkness. Wen Kexing took a step forward to tug Zhou Zishu, pulling him to one side. Reaching out, he took Zhou Zishu's bi-sword from his waist and glided his finger along the blade. A hint of appreciation bloomed on his face. Then, with a quiver of his wrist, the tip of the sword trembled slight and the long sword thrust out. Blindsided, the person around the corner was caught off guard and let out a light grunt. They flicked their fingers in response and knocked the sword askew. Wen Kexing changed his stance at once. In Zhou Zishu's hand, that nimble sword moved in clear and forthright strokes. When Wen Kexing wielded it, however, it resembled maggots festering on bones as it lashed out in fiendish strokes. Amidst the darkness, the two opponents exchanged countless moves in the time it took to blink. After listening to the clash for a while, Zhou Zishu frowned. Senior Ye, he called out. A snort echoed through the dark. Zhou Zishu raised his hand and let the fluorescent pearl shine again. It illuminated the scowl on Ye Bai's face that was even fouler than usual. Only then did Wen Kexing withdraw the sword. Cheerily, he cupped his fist and saluted him. Oh dear, what a mistake. It was a misunderstanding. A pure misunderstanding. The lie couldn't have been plainer. If Zhou Zishu could identify Ye Bai by the sound of their exchange alone, so could have Wen Kexing, who had personally been exchanging blows with him. It was evident that Wen Kexing had used the pretext of darkness to dish out a beating as he had truthfully wished to do so. Clearly, Wen Kexing still held some deep resentment toward the mysterious old senior. Ye Bai swept his gaze over Zhou Zishu and frowned. How did you end up in this half-dead state? Determined to preserve as much energy as possible, Zhou Zishu leaned sideways against the wall and cut off the man in white before he could continue nagging. This junior is too incapable and is a rice bin. Somewhat startled, Yabai cast him a second look before nodding. Well, at least you're self-aware enough. He surveyed the surrounding, then beckoned the three of them, come this way. Josishu and Wen Kexing knew that this old man was very capable and were happy for him to take the lead. The two of them provided support by bringing up the rear, trapping Jiang Chengling in the middle. As they walked, Wen Kexing suddenly came up to Josishu, hooked an arm around his waist and silently took an arm of his to prop it over his shoulder. Josishu frowned at him. Do I look like a cripple to you? Wen Kexing gave an exasperated sigh. Now that the old freak is here, what are you still acting tough for? Come on. Since they had fallen into those tunnels, the two men had run into one dangerous situation after another. As if the goddamn place was a living hellhole with traps in each one of its labyrinthine tunnels. It was therefore rather odd that, as they followed Yabai around, they made smooth progress from then on. The four of them took many bends and turns before they came upon what looked like a large reception hall. Everything seemed quiet, but as soon as they stepped in, countless round balls about a foot in diameter came rolling at them from all directions. Out of reflex, Wen Kexing kicked Jiang Chengling backwards before gathering Josishu into his arms and surged up 40 feet high. These things had made him suffer immensely. Made with some unknown craftsmanship, they exploded whenever they came into contact with something. The day prior, he had been chased around in the tunnels by these things for so long, he had felt like a large rat. Yabai, however, remained collected. Watching those spheres surge at them like the tide, he let out a sharp grunt and struck his palm through the air in front of him with some mysterious technique. Jiang Chengling's eyes were sharp and he noticed that the stone tile by Yabai's feet shattered in an instant. The first sphere that rolled over was the first to suffer damage and it exploded, setting off a chain reaction. Each ball that came afterwards blew up, one after another. Yabai stretched both hands in front of him, appearing as if he had erected an invisible wall that blocked them from the chaos which was almost a force of nature in itself. It made Wen Kexing grow solemn for once as he regarded pensively at Yabai, whose back is in front of them. The man in white's thundering voice resonated through the air, show yourself already. With that, he reached out his hand and made a grabbing motion at thin air. An enormous slab of stone fell from the wall of the enormous hall. Josishu and company followed Yabai's gaze to the silhouette that had appeared in the newly revealed entrance. They froze on the spot, dumbfounded. End chapter.